All right, that's like some of the general news. I think we could touch on this Carlos saga. I'm probably not going to get too much into like the beginking stuff. I'll just give a quick recap of what happened.
Go on.
But there were some developments that happened recently that kind of got my attention, and I was kind of curious. I wanted to get your thoughts on it too, because if this is the case, it's not the first time that Riot have pulled something like this. So for any of you guys who have been living under a rock, actually. Already, I'll say that if you need to get caught up on what has happened with G2 and Carlos, there is an episode that covers a lot of it in detail. It's the Four Horsemen episode that was done with Monty, Richard, and Thorin, and Lauren.
Yes.
I believe her name was.
Lauren Flanagan.
There you go, Lauren Flanagan, who joined to give insight on the agent side of things, the agency side of things. But they covered this topic a bit there. Already good show. Glad that it happened. Gave different perspectives on the matter, and so I thought that you came in from the top rope. You did a good job with the Andrew Tate bit. If he showed up with $1 billion, would it be different? And I was like, yep, that's a hell of a line, right there. That's the fucking line. Drop the mic and wrap it up, because you know it wouldn't be the case. But Andrew Tate Andrew Tate, we don't even know if Carlos was partying direct. Like Carlos just posted a video where he's in a group at a club, and Andrew Tate apparently happens to be a part of that group. And Carlos posts this video thinking, hey, whatever. He pushes the line, and he's going to push the line. And he posts edgy things. He's going to make it happen and see what he can do about it, right? Well, it turns out that the internet, of course, chooses this to blow up on. And the usual suspects start coming out of the woodwork, along with.
And it acted like the video was him turning to Andrew Tate, going, "You will be the messiah of my new esport."
Yeah,
no, like you say, he just turned the video. He's in it for like 2 seconds himself. It almost looks, by the way, if you don't know, like Carlos is like just angling in, like trying to get a shot behind a hot girl or something who's not even with him, like hover-handed. That's almost the vibe you get. Is you don't even know from the video if he even knows him.
The vibe that I got was that it was somebody else who was just kind of like doing that pan to record, like the group. So it's like, are they part? Like, you don't even know.
Like he did imply, obviously, the edgy joke was he put like, we're celebrating G2 winning the world championship. He did put some line like that, didn't he? To be the body, of course. Of course.
Dude, one thing. All right, so that's the situation. The outrage mob kicks off, of course, because it was a slow news week, so they needed something to get pissed about. And G2 and Carlos just happen to be in that sort of scenario where you're up against the wall, and it's the question of whether you placate the mob, even though there is no placating the mob, by giving one of the corporate PR answers, one of the false apologies that everybody knows is false, with 2 brain cells to rub together. Everybody knows that those are false apologies when they're made, that it's PR. But or do you just stick to it and you go through? Well, turns out they actually do give the PR answer, and he's forced to give a couple of tweets as well on his own personal account, where it's also it wasn't super clear. I mean, he was like apologizing, but it didn't sound like he was apologizing. It sounded like he was trying to hedge a little bit. And it's like, fine, fair enough. I mean, listen, we all know you got a gun to your head. You're not doing this because you want to. You're doing this because somebody's told you that you have to, or that you need to do this to calm the situation
down. As the rest of the story played out, it was implied like it's no longer his reputation. It's like the fate of G2, the team existing, almost weird on this angle, which, by the way, is a common tactic of these people who try to take you down. They just look, right, are you ironclad? Very few people are, by the way. Most people will break individually. They'll feel bad. But if you can withstand the storm, they go, right, what's the pressure point in this guy's life? Is there a woman that he's with? Is there a colleague he's with? Can his company be attacked? What about the people who work for him? And they'll just keep prodding, and then when they find that pressure point, then the question becomes, are you willing to let that pressure point cave in, or will you just cave? And in this particular case, that's what kind of happened, right?
So this is precisely what happened. And actually, I'll give you a quick read of what the tweet was, although where's the follow-up? Okay, I'm missing, it was 1 or 2, and maybe the second one was taken off.
The follow-up was the one where basically, he never even mentioned Andrew Tate. Just as an abstract principle said, like, no one ever police, who I'm friends with or something like that, right?
So it's so basically his reaction is, nobody will ever be able to police my friendships. I draw my line here. I party with whoever the fuck I want. And it's like, fine, fair enough. You party with it. That's the other thing as well. It's like, I party with it's like, dude, the number of people we've partied with over the years, are you going to say that every single person you've partied with is a friend? It's like, no. Like, maybe it's just somebody you met at the party, whatever. Who cares? Like, you'll never see them again. But
he even took from that tweet the way he phrased it. Like, notice he didn't go, Andrew's a friend of mine, I'll personally vouch for him. The way he phrased it was exactly, think of the personality of people like Carlos and me. It was like, look, whether he's my friend or not, it's none of your business. But that's the point. It's none of your business. That's what I took the tweet as.
Exactly. But everybody, of course, including the guest on the Four Horsemen, the Lauren Laura, she mentions, she says that at that point, because he brought G2 into the brand, because he said this is celebrating G2, now he's aligned himself with the G2 brand. And so that brings G2 into it. And that's what makes this a big public thing, is that it's no longer just Carlos, even though this really is just all about Carlos. But, they can use that as an excuse now to say, oh, but no, he involved G2. So it's not just about Carlos. Now we're thinking about the G2 brand, and he's responsible for the G2 brand, and he has to behave himself better. Whereas if he had not mentioned G2 and this had just been like some random video of him, could have been a totally different situation. But because he's so closely tied to G2, this is where it winds up. So the apologies,
apologies. No one will ever be held to that standard that they just established right there with that President Semmler.
Of course
by
not.
that logic, by the way, remember, by that logic, everyone who works for ESL and everyone who works for Riot is complicit in all of the crimes and evil statements of everyone who ever was at the top of the companies. That's exactly, by the way, the position that nearly everyone criticizing Carlos is in, that they're within those circles. But they're going to hold him to a precedent that now everyone in G2 can lose their job, lose their livelihood, is a piece of shit unless they all come out against Carlos. But these same people, what do they do, Semmler, when you tell them, do something about ESL and Saudi? I got to earn a living. Again, no one in G2 does, though. That's what I mean. What they did in this whole thing is continually set up standards that will never be applied to anyone except the designated bad man, who you'll notice will always be a certain demographic, on a certain political end of the spectrum, on a certain, like you said earlier, resentment matrix. It's always going to be someone who's just escaping the bucket. It's the crab that's almost over the edge that you pull down. You don't just pull the other one next to you. You're all reaching up for the one there to pull down. And that's the key reason that metaphor is so brilliant, the crab's in a bucket. Because it's not like you grab him and go up with him. You just pull him down to where you are. That's why it's about resentment. You're right. Like, I thought Richard nailed it in his article, because what Richard made the key point was, whether or not you think the Andrew Tate guy's bad or not, whether you think that was a big mistake, whether you think the PR thing, whether you think companies should have to face these consequences, the point that Richard made, it was so obviously true, is that really, these people were already seething and waiting, wishing Carlos would do something they could attack. And the worst thing is, by the way, lots of them have tried this for years. Oh, that joke was so over the line. Like, oh, he's just actually like, he's playing with fire. He's
critical mass.
Yeah, but the problem was they could never quite get it to land, like you say, because enough people would go, it's a joke, it's Carlos, come on. And the problem was, when they saw initially that it was landing and then it was sticking and they had a foothold, that's why nothing he said. Because here's the most sinister part about that story, dude. I want to get your take on this. Is the notion that you aren't even allowed to do a fake apology in which you say the things they want to hear. At that point, if then go, but I infer from this that he might not totally believe it. So it is literally now about thought crime. We must now break Carlos in his mind like some fucked up dystopian sci-fi movie. We must know, Semmler, that he literally for himself loves Big Brother. We must know that he literally does see 5 lights instead of 4. It's not enough to even say you do. You have to actually believe it. And only once you have been totally broken, then you can continue, because spoiler, there isn't a you left anymore. You've now become an empty vessel for what they want and driving their agendas and things that they want to say. And for that point onwards, this is why actually Carlos had to do what he was going to do. You have to leave completely. There's no way back once you take a step down that road. Because as you saw, he did try half bending the knee, didn't he? And what it got him, mate, like Ned Stark, was his fucking head lopped off.
Well, it's I'm trying to find it, because it's a quote that I like, but I'm trying to remember precisely who it was. It was No, it's one that I've mentioned in the past where everything. I think it was Cardinal George of Chicago, but everything is. We live in a world where everything is permitted, but nothing is forgiven.
Yes.
And so, if you live in that world, then it doesn't matter. You cross the line, so you're encouraged to cross the line at all turns. But if you cross the line that arbitrarily that day they decide is the line that's verboten to cross, well, then that's it. There's no redemption possible for you. You've crossed the line, even though the line is completely arbitrary, and it really depends on the day and who decides what the line is. It doesn't matter. Once you cross that line, that's it. Then you're done, and there's no possible. There's no possibility of redemption. There's no possibility of having.
You're always the guy who did that thing. Richard said it best.
It's that apology. It's like apologies. There's no redemption, and that's a real problem in a sort of scenario where it's just like people make mistakes. People are fallible. They make mistakes. You need to be able to have redemption in order to have a society. Because if everything you do gets held against you forevermore, you're fucked. There's no coming back from that. Then you're just you are the crabs in the bucket. You're constantly going to be pulling everybody back. And so instead of there being a possibility of redemption and getting out, you're always going to be pulled back into the envy and the pride and all this horrible just judging everybody else. Weird. It's like I've heard this somewhere before.
That's
Dante,
how you know.
He was onto something here.
Yeah, dude,
But,
that's how you know, though, that that's what they want. Because look, here's the thing. You can always tell by the outcome that is desired by people's actions, what their technique is, what their strategy is. So here's the thing, Semmler. If the real strategy was Carlos is one of the like founding people, one of the builders of esports, he's a massive figure. He's someone who can have massive influence over people. If the real premise was he just did something a bit too naughty or a bit too over the line and we need him to be appropriately punished, then as you say, the entire approach would be rehabilitation. Because remember, you can never replace a Carlos. You can't just suddenly grow another CEO that's just as good as Carlos and does all the No, we need him. So what you would do is if you were a good faith individual who could ever accept an apology, Semmler, you'd not only accept it, but you'd, even if it was a fake one, the reason you'd accept it is this reason. Because what you'd want is to, again, allow the mob to subside. And then what you would want to do is this. You'd want to actually go to Carlos in good faith and go, look, we come from totally different perspectives and different opinions, and I have a different life experience to you, and I've seen or heard different things about this person you haven't. So let's have a talk about it. Maybe let's even have a conversation about it. Let's ask why you thought this was... That's what you'd want to do. You'd want to like actually educate the person. You'd want to find out, like, is there a side they haven't seen to this? You'd want to actually find out things like, what were you really even intending when you did that? Like, let's get to the bottom of this. Let's figure out, did something go wrong somewhere? Can we have a conversation about this? Can we all learn from this? And make, no, what they wanted, Semmler, was exactly what they ended up getting. They wanted his head. As you say, he could never be redeemed. They'll say his apology was a bad faith apology. It was bad faith to imply they could ever accept an apology. As I said, they didn't want an apology. They wanted revenge, and then they wanted unconditional surrender. Now, if you don't know, by the way, look this up in history. Do you know how rarely ever in history, except in the eras when they just didn't even do surrenders and they just took everyone and killed them, made everyone slave? Yeah. You don't ever do a scenario where you tell someone you must unconditionally surrender, because whether or not you plan to violate them or not, it breaks their spirit as a people. It breaks their identity, because what they're saying when they unconditionally surrender is, I'm at your mercy. You can do anything to me. You can utterly out, because remember, unconditional means there's no terms to my surrender. I won't
now
even
we've
say
got
it.
hentai. Great.
Yeah,
now
I won't even say in this case you can come in and you can take over the country and I surrender the military and I won't fight anymore and we'll pay you reparations, but there's a limit. Like, for example, you have to like ensure the safety of some of these people. You have to show that you won't like punish us unduly. No, unconditional surrender means you just actually bow your head and you have to just hope they don't lop your head off, right? That is, if you want to go to that level, then the person's action has to be so extreme that that's appropriate. And it obviously wasn't. And here's the craziest angle. Here's another angle people missed, Semmler, because I just didn't want to go into it too much on that show because other people didn't know what I was talking about. The craziest angle of all is this, Semmler. I've got an amazing example from the same week or so involving Carlos that shows the hypocrisy of the whole industry, right? You might not remember this, but you know when the whole NEOM thing first started and introduced to Saudi Arabia and the Public Investment Fund, it was in 2020 and it was to do with LEC initially, right? Then we were involved because after that it was Blast, wasn't it? They were going to get sponsored by NEOM and they were even going to like partner with them. And what people don't know is this: people like me and others said publicly, because when it was happening in League of Legends, people said to Carlos, who was obviously a very vocal public CEO, who might reply to your tweet, unlike any of these other people, because he's trying to be authentic. They said to him, basically, like, how can you, bear in mind you're not just some corporate shill, how can you go along with this, Carlos, and be representing and partnering with people who are evil, essentially, right? And Carlos himself replied in a tweet and said something like, you know, like, of course I would never, like, work with people who are into evil shit like that, or something like that. Like, it's some tweet like that, right? And what happened was it did get cancelled in Blast. I even heard teams put pressure on as well as talent. Now, he actually was getting roasted the week before this happened, but people don't know it because it wasn't a massive story. Because this is, I think, how we met Andrew Tate. I believe he was in Dubai, Semmler. He was in Dubai or the Middle East at some sort of a business conference where he was speaking and even took a photo, which I don't think was on his social media, I think it was on someone else's, where he was with a bunch of very wealthy Middle Eastern businessman type figures who might be involved with things that might be potentially dodgy with women. Some of them might even have their own group of women who might have a special association with them that you're not allowed in the West, right? How was that not the front page story? Why was that not what got him cancelled? Why was that not anything anyone gave a fuck about? But then he just went over essentially a few days later to a different room and raised a bottle with a guy who's been too edgy on the internet and said he might do or believe things that those people actually do and implement on their society, that's what gets you cancelled. That doesn't belong in esports, and that is evil. It's like I said on Four Horsemen. When you say, I'm going to judge what doesn't belong, it infers everything you won't judge and you allow is something that belongs. That is a direct logical inference.
Yes.
And so you don't ever have to come out and say, I love Saudi Arabia and how they treat women. Your actions and what you voted with, what you care about and what you fight for shows if you believe in that or not.
That's precisely it.
Isn't that wild? No one knows that.
It just comes back around to skin in the game, man. It just comes back around to skin in the game. They found the perfect opportunity where it's like they risk nothing and yet they can take him out. Whereas, calling out somebody who would actually, wreck them, i.e. pays their bills, can't do that. And so that's always going to be the line. That's always going to be where they run up against it. And so you always know that whenever they do get worked up about something, it's a distraction or it doesn't have any real meaning on the industry apart from somebody just got caught. And so this time around, it's Carlos who got caught. Once upon a time, it was James who got caught. It just goes that way. That's just the way of things, sadly. Although James, maybe James is a bit of a different situation because that was Gabe waking up on the wrong side of the bed that morning. But so not the same situation. But one thing that I wanted to bring up and that actually broke very recently in regards to this story was there was a couple of rumors going around. And so this is from Jackson.gg, who are pretty solid, right? They have a pretty good track record. I'm not aware of them fucking any news up.
I can tell you, they've contacted. I will, to some degree, vouch for them in the sense that they have contacted me previously.
Okay.
And sometimes asked me, "Do you have any info or lead on this?" And sometimes I will even say, "Yes, I do actually, but I think it's the same one you have. I actually think this story seems like it checks out." I'll tell you what I know. And sometimes some of those stories they've run them through and they're able to get them out there. So even though actually there's a separate story that also was in the news recently, which we might get to later from Jackson, which was disputed. Generally, I agree. I have not found them to be people who are dodgy. I have actually found them to be pretty legit individuals, and they do seem like they are trying the proper journalistic method. Whereas actually, if people don't know, unlike them, there was another set of group of people who also break news in League of Legends specifically, who were also reporting similar things, Semmler, and those people are not trustworthy. Those people have been shown to have one source, and then the source isn't itself a direct source, and it's someone who heard something, who heard something, who heard something. And what they do is, if you don't know the world of journalism, if you're legit, there's a million rumors like that going. You can't publish them because they haven't been run down. You haven't verified them. You haven't corroborated them. You might mess someone's whole career and life up with what ends up being a lie or a vicious rumor because you heard something and wanted to go first. That's why I always say you can always tell the shitter journalist, because when the shitter journalist, he has no connections. He has no legit sources. He doesn't have secrets. So when he gets one, he quickly goes, "Oh my God, I think I've got a secret for everyone." And he doesn't bother to check. And he goes, "Oh, but I might not be able to get the story over the line. Oh, but this is so important, Bob. But if I was the first," and he greeds and he goes for it and he goes out the gap. If you're actually a legit journalist, you have so many stories. You can let one go when it's not legit because another legit one's coming that will be verified. People like Richard Lewis have stories that are like 80% complete and written up that will never be published because that's how legit he is. He doesn't go, "Well, basically, no, it is true, so get it over the line." No, he goes, "I'm sorry, I couldn't get the second source. I couldn't verify this detail. This speculation could be really harmful in some cases, like G2, to the shareholders. It could cause them fucking all sorts of things. It could ruin people's lives and careers. So actually, I'll be responsible. I won't publish." Like, Jackson one seems legit as far as I can tell.
Jackson seemed to be on the money. And yeah, I haven't heard exactly because you vouch for him. I've heard other journalists vouch for him, and it seems to me like they're really solid. I haven't caught them in anything, and it doesn't seem like there's been any scandal around them. So I'm willing to run with this one because they came out with an article recently where it says, and you're right, there is another article that we'll get to later from them as well in regards to our favorite team, Astralis.
Indeed.
But for this one right now, it's Riot Games reportedly blacklisted Ocelot. And so this could be the reason why the VCT thing happens, and and this could also be the reason why there's this rumor going around right now that he is divesting his shares and that he's forced to sell his shares because he personally is not allowed to be involved with any Riot products. And so this really is like the personal way to go about it, where Riot are like, "Okay, fuck you in particular, not your brand, or as in like not your organization that you own and built. We'll still work with G2, but you are verboten now. You are out. You are banned." And so Riot have gone ahead, and it seems like Riot have gone ahead and made it so that It's a Monte Cristo situation all over again. A Quispedati Monte Cristo situation where he's going to be forced to sell. He's going to essentially be forced out of the project that he built, and that could be a great personal cost to him down the line, because obviously G2 are one of the biggest orgs in the industry, and so this is a huge play if true from Riot, who are really going after Carlos in particular. Like, what do you think about this situation?
Without going into too much detail, the problem is this. As far as I know, because let's be real, they did on this also say reportedly. It's not like they've confirmed it. I will say this is more like a rumor. And as far as I know, all I'll say is I don't actually think it is true. And not just because of the LEC people going, we never technically had. No, as far as I know, it's not true. But I can't give more details. But what I will say is this. It really does say a lot about Riot Games that it is so instantly believable and would be entirely within character and par for the course for them to do this. Because as you say, the way they treated Monte Cristo, the way they've treated other people, if people don't know, people always get this story wrong as well, because the devil is in the details. Absolutely. The devil is in the details, guys. The big picture might look legit. Like, it might be like, right, well, remember what they claim about the Renegade scenario. They've never produced evidence. So right now we have to be skeptical of their claims. They claim that Monte had a secret agreement that he would sell the company back to Chris Badawi, who was just acting as like a CEO of like the non-league part or something. Or, he was just like him back as his employee. He didn't own the company because he was blacklisted and banned at the time. And you can't own the company if you're banned. And they claimed that if you actually have an agreement in place that in the future something will happen, they treat it as though it's already activated now, which is not a terrible premise. Like, obviously one day it will activate, and they will essentially punish you now so that it doesn't get so one day he does own the company. You have to. So what they did, people forget this detail. They all go. So what they did is they just made Monty sell the company. Like, boo-hoo, I bet he made a bit of money. No, they did it in an incredibly capricious manner, Semmler. What they did is they actually told Monty, not only will we not produce evidence, even when a lawyer asks it, won't show you the evidence of what you've done wrong. Just know we are infallible and we know you did it wrong. Our verdict was absolute nonsense, by the way. Behind the scenes, it was like they even claim someone just eavesdropped on them, like talking in like a fucking open setting, like, and they were not sell the company back. Like the most, like just like a child would write that fucking script. It's so implausible, isn't it? What, they can't even get like a fucking encrypted WhatsApp message or something, you twat. They're just doing this in public, like when fucking Kirsten Dignitas threw that game and had an ARAM at that like Columbus event or whatever the fuck it was. So anyway, they claim that, right? But this is even worse. They didn't tell him like, so you've got like, until the next season to divest and sell the company. No, what they told him is this: you have to basically sell by this date. Here's the one buyer you're allowed. There you go. You're out. You're over a barrel. Your pants are down. Now just let this guy fuck you. That's what they did. And so even though Monty did make like a profit because he bought him for very little back when the spots could go, if you don't know, first of all, a few years later, some of the players in his teams became like top players in the world. Got nothing from that. Had to sell immediately for fuck all money. Secondly, it got franchised as a league. So now, by the way, as you've seen by these LEC slots, like Astralis is going to sell, instead of getting like $1 million, he would have been getting like 30 million for just waiting 3-4 more years and spending maybe 4, 5, 6 million more. And then after all of that, he couldn't even be in a situation where he can ever own a team again. Like, that was an insane one, because what they really tested there, and they were right. By the way, Riot Games is absolutely correct, and this is how IP law works right now. They have the right to do all of that. It's like they actually are, if you don't know, the god of their game. Only within their little domain in their game, but they have ultimate power. I know it sounds like the fucking prequel, ultimate power. Like they're not. None of them are as cool as Palpatine, by the way. But like they're more like fucking that shit robot that was just spinning sabers, got wrecked by like fucking Anakin Skywalker. That was like General Grievous or some General Grievance Studies. There you go, whatever.
There you go, mate. There you go.
Masters really of spin, aren't they?
Like,
right?
That is the takeaway, though. That was like the first takeaway that I saw when one of my first takeaways on this was that, holy shit, who's ever going to invest in this industry again? Like, why would you ever take the risk?
Sadly, a lot of people did, I know.
Of investing, though. Now, after you see like yet another example of how your entire investment can get yanked out from underneath you at a moment's notice for any reason. That doesn't even need to make sense, the reason. You can literally just get your entire investment tanked overnight, as if there wasn't enough reason. Already it's like, okay, hold on. So your whole company is already relying on these game developers, right? Yep. You don't actually own the product that you're running your company on, right? No. And so these game developers, you're good friends with them, right? Yes. Do you have any guarantees that you're going to have any future work with them? So that, I don't know, we could like build some kind of like over the years kind of model, so there's some like return on it. No. And also it gets better. they can also pull the rug out and deny us the ability to run any of their events and all. But I don't, that's just the tournament organizer. That's also one of the massive reasons why this whole ESL getting bought for $1 billion. I'm like, dude, have you not heard of what they did, what Blizzard and Riot did to them when they pulled StarCraft 2 and pulled League of Legends and let them build up their scenes and then said, thanks, those are ours now. And ESL were left holding the bag after making all those investments. Like, how anybody can put more money into esports as it stands right now, it blows my mind.
If people don't know, Semmler's right. ESL, by the way, relies on Gabe Newell not waking up and saying, actually, let's take Counter-Strike back. If they ever do that, by the way,
they'd be done. They'd be
ESL,
dead.
as a company, will just become PGL when they didn't have CSGO events. They will just be white labeling dog shit like World of Tanks and Pokemon Unite. They'll be doing, that'll be the games they'll be doing. And as a result, by the way, they'll be irrelevant in esports. Like, their whole fucking, that $1 billion purchase is a house of cards, and the bottom card are all held by the game devs, and they can take them back anytime they want. They're just lucky that in CSGO they don't do it like they did, as you say, in Riot Games, where basically, just like with VCT, they said, oh, did you spend millions building up our thing and getting it all to be awesome and spend the money on all your players and make a really good circuit? Thanks. We'll be taking our ball home. No more game for anyone. Bye.
Imagine your Optic Gaming. It's like you've invested all this money into building these teams, into building these brands, into generating interest. You have these streamers, you have all this shit that you've got going on, and it's like, oh yeah, no, by the way, you won't be involved in the league.
Oh, by the way, there's another detail to the Monty one that's even crazier. The whole thing, it isn't just that they wanted to fuck with Monty. That was part of it. We wanted revenge. And he's been very critical of Riot for years and years on my show, Summoning Insight, and on his Twitter, which was a massive follower. He was a massive influencer. Obviously, to this day, he has like 300,000 fucking Twitter followers. Like, he's an enormous figure. But also, this is the key part that people miss, Semmler. It wasn't like just to fuck with Monty that there was one buyer. That was also from day one, the scam of if you bought into the Riot ecosystem. At any moment in time, Semmler, it's like, remember, think of them, instead of the god, I'll use this analogy. They're the dad that's pressing the play and the pause button on the boombox when we're all playing musical chairs. Now, everyone who's ever played this game knows exactly where this is going. Because what does that dad do? You could be playing the best game of musical chairs ever. You're timing it just right when you go around. You know he stops out every 5 seconds. But if he has a son or a cousin or a little nephew that he wants to get the chair, he'll just make sure you can't be in front of the chair when he pauses the music. He'll do it when the kid's just about to sit on and they'll pause it. And that's why the little kid who was not good at the game gets to still get in the next round or win the game, doesn't he? Same with Pass the Parcel. Bizarrely for you, it goes really quick. When it comes to him, it's going really slowly, right? If you don't get it, what they were doing by saying you have to sell to this one person is they were saying this: oh, hey, guy who's top of my Rolodex, so I really want to be in my ecosystem, evil foreign investor, maybe a sports franchise person that I just want to be in bed with generally for all of my franchise leagues. You know what? Good news. Spot on the roster just opened up. This guy called Monte Cristo is going to sell to you. Contact him. By the way, you're going to be the only bidder, so bid whatever you like for it. He has to say yes, right? I'd suggest maybe in this range. Oh, but I'd obviously never legally say that. Anyway, you just go and do business with him, and magically you're in my ecosystem. Because another thing, by the way, that will spin separately, if people want a very quick take on the whole Optic VCT thing, which will give you a different perspective on it. But why would, here's the other thing that these game devs are doing, and it was actually Blizzard and Overwatch that pioneered this, right? Yes, most people in Overwatch League, even though they can't say it publicly, I think legally they can't even say it, by the way, if they signed some of these contracts, they can't admit now, Semmler, that they bought a lemon, that the Overwatch League slot wasn't worth 20 million, or even worse, the second round was 30 and 40. Not only did they know it wasn't worth it, but even better, it was all a con that when you bought into that, it was like, right, you've got two choices. Do you want to just waste the 30 million you've spent? Or do you want it to be spun into something that's a gamble of 50, but could get even more? So they went, good news, we got the CDL coming up for COD. Oh, what's that? You're already in Overwatch League. Well, you're the first customer in line, sir. Exactly. Step right up. And that's going to be the game that they're all playing. So that's what LCS and LEC was. Were you in LCS and LEC? If you don't know, by the way, Optic was. They fucked around. They messed it up and they had to leave and sell out, right? That's why if you're someone like Riot, it's like, well, haven't the fucking hens come home to roost? Because we're the ones who decide who's in our next franchise league. What do you know? You ain't in. And actually, if you don't know, the most scandalous part wasn't just that Optic isn't in. There were like orgs that have not even the tenure of Optic, that don't even have as good teams, that don't have any of the things that in theory should be the things. Like, this isn't like when the Blast announced that like Complexity's in, but Fnatic isn't. Like, this isn't like that. This would be like if they were like, Fnatic isn't in, but Ents is in. It's like, what the fuck? Who's Ents? You know what I mean? Like, that's how egregious this one would be. At least Complexity had the Dallas Cowboys and all that, and they had this history in the game. So yeah, if people don't know, there's even that like scam element where you're not even buying in to this. You're basically buying into like a subscription program to forever be part of franchise leagues for every game in the future. It's going to expand out, isn't it? Like, that's going to be the biggest joke of all time. It's like, it's just going to be Riot, Blizzard and their pals just making these big companies and taking all the money. And as I say, you might think like these idiots did, Semmler, but I'm at the top of the LCS ecosystem. Yeah, for now, until Riot goes, yeah, thanks for building that for me. I'm going to take that and give it to my friend now. Because that's the game. This is why it all comes back to the IP rights. Like, they are God. I'm sorry, they are.
This is why when Valorant was kicking off and all of these talks about making teams and making leagues and making all this stuff, I'm just sitting here going, have you guys already forgotten history and how this works? They're going to take it away from you, and they're going to play God with your investment. They're going to be the ones who decide whether you're in it or not. And sure enough, it's playing out exactly that way. So, and on one side, I'm just like, I don't actually have any pity for these guys. It's just like, listen, dude, you understood the rules of the game when you got involved. You knew that this could be a risk.
You'll like this line.
Go for it.
One flashpoint in the hand is worth 2 VCTs in the bush.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. I've heard that one before.
There you go. Okay.
It is. I mean, Riot are just such scumbags. It really is. It's a never-ending trove of just fucking, entertainment.
And it's going to continue. Let's be real. They're never going to stop.
Yeah, no. It's just you can just keep going forever. And then also, I mean, do have to mention that Richard did drop a banger of an article summing a bunch of this up as well, and also mentioning the fact that, again, I think you really nail it, where it's just like, yes, Carlos was literally in that area to have a speech with people who do the things that they are accusing him of doing, and it's just like nobody cares about that sort of thing. And so the article really, sums up some of the Carlos debacle and also goes into a little bit more of the gigantic hypocrites that are calling him out. So it's worth checking that one out as well. We'll have it in the description down below and all that sort of stuff.
Obviously, we always have some spicy topics on By the Numbers. And let's not forget, we have a spicy set of bonuses from eSportsBet. Because first of all, they have the classic first-time deposit bonus of 50% on up to 200 USDT. And if you don't like that one, there's another alternate first-time deposit bonus, which is up to 100 USDT bet forgiveness. And I want to give you guys a little tip. If you've never done this one and you're thinking of it, when you do this, what basically you do is you make a bet up to 100 USDT. If you lose the bet, you go to the Discord of eSportsBet, contact the mods, tell them you want the bet forgiveness and that Thorin or Insight and Esports sent you. They'll credit your account up to 100 USDT back, and basically it's like you didn't lose the bet. Now, there's two angles I want to give you here. One, I would recommend what you do if you make this bet is pick an underdog with decent odds, like over 2 is the odds, maybe 2.1, 2.2, but you think actually they're going to win the match. And that way, if you win the match, you're going to get 2.1 or 2 times your money, and you're going to have loads more anyway. You can have 200, 220, and if you lose, you get the 100 back anyway.
And also real quick, worth mentioning, Grog Coin questions. We're doing Grog Coin questions live. Be sure to get your questions in there, guys, because we did have last week, and there are a few there, but there's also a few, like, you got a chance as well if you want to put some more in there. So hop in the Discord and ask some questions if you got some.
Want to see more cool, funny, interesting clips based on topics from my content? Well, subscribe to this channel then, or, be a pleb and don't.